got Captain Crunch there or what?
Yeah. I'm getting my Count Chocula on.
Love cereal, dude.
Can you believe that that's a cereal?
Can you believe that they purport cereal as to be a health food?
It's unbelievable, hey? I mean,
That
at some point they were just selling colors and shapes.
yeah, you know what? It was like they'd finished building all the tires. And they're like, what do we do with all these leftovers? I know.
Right,
Let's make
right.
it into cereal. We'll flavor it.
Let's make some Lucky Stars. They're magically delicious.
They really are, though. But you
I
might as well eat shredded metal because that's how it feels.
Yeah, you might as well just eat microplastics.
Hey, yeah. One of the first things when my wife and I really started to think we need to change our life around and we need to really improve our health. No more cereal in the house. Gone. We got rid of that for our
Oh
kids.
yeah,
It's
buddy.
so bad. Yeah.
No, yeah. Like our kids, they got a box of crap cereal, like garbage cereal, the Count Chocula and all that good stuff. They got a box of that once per year at Christmas. They got to pick it out themselves as a Christmas treat, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And so it was a big deal, man. They'd walk around the store, our grocery store here in Rossland, and pick out their favorite little Lucky Stars or whatever.
Yeah.
One box a year, buddy.
It's smart. I'm glad. I know that you and your wife have done things pretty correctly with your children as best you could. And we didn't start off the greatest. We've always eaten healthy food. I always cook lunch. I always cook dinner, and it's always all natural. There's no processed in our dinners and lunches generally.
Right on, right on.
Breakfast, though, breakfast and then children's snacks for lunch. That's kind of been the thing.
It's tricky, man.
And we're guilty of doing the ultra processed thing for a while until we finally,
Everyone
a couple
is.
years ago, we put our foot down and said, enough. We're not doing fruit by the foot. We're not doing fruit roll up and gushers and yeah. And it's hard, dude, because the kids are so used to it. And the kids go everywhere, and that's where it is. It's all over the place.
Well, it's hard because it's a slippery, corrosive slope that if you're not paying attention, it just happens. I mean, you look one way and you look back, and all of a sudden your shelves are filled with Count Chocula. But then you start getting a grip on it. Then you start like Oxum's razoring out all of the garbage food in the house. But then the problem is your kids walk out the front door over to their friend's place, over to their buddy's house, over to the sleepover, over to the whatever.
Yeah.
And there's all the Count Chocula there. And then it's the comparisons. Well, how come they've got a phone? How come they eat Count Chocula? How come they always go to McDonald's? It's never ending, man. But man, I drew the line.
Yeah, it's a slow process. We've been working on it for about 2 years now, and we're finally getting our kids to the point where they know, don't bother asking at home. If I make it, that's what we're eating, kind of. And I fight. I mean, they're little kids. I still fight with them here
How
and
old are
there.
they again?
5, 8, and 14.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. So the 14-year-old, he's golden.
That's a good. Can be getting into the program. Yeah.
And he's a gym rat now. I got him pumping weights,
There you
so now he's doing protein shakes.
Easy
and
peasy.
Yeah, he's doing the amino acids, and he's kind of doing like he's trying to follow along. Yeah, which is good. It's the little ones though. Yeah, there were some years in there where we were kind of pumping them full of the crap, and now they're
used to it.
That's standard. Yeah, so
right.
There's a little
SOP,
bit of
but SOP.
Yeah, it's growing pains to change the program. But it's good. I noticed the huge difference. One of the things that I do now is minimum 3 or 4 times a week when I cook breakfast for before school. It's protein and fat, and that's it.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we don't buy bread. We only make our own bread now.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're making your own sourdough.
So, well, not just sourdough. We make homemade fermented white bread, and it's
okay,
dude. It's
how would you distinguish the difference between fermented white bread and sourdough?
Okay,
Because
so
they're both fermentation process.
Yeah, the fermentation only is about an hour. So what we do is we make a sugar water, a rapid rise kind of white bread. So it's only fermenting for about an hour as compared to sourdough, which is days.
And what flour are you using?
We use unbleached white flour mostly.
So you're not like you haven't achieved the rarefied air of growing your own,
Mhm.
hand milling it, and
No.
then, dude, I almost so for a couple of years I was involved in um a gluten-free bakery here in town
Yeah.
that it got to a point where I was starting to become like a not a co-owner, but was like that close to pulling the trigger on investing. I'd already
Yep.
invested my time, investing money, and committing to like long-term trajectory, kind of take over Canada with healthy food mission. Is dude, I was like on the precipice, and I had it scaled out in my head. I knew
Yeah.
how big I would make it. I knew the products I was going to deliver, and we were at a point where I was researching um, manual stone milling equipment because I was going to
Mm.
go full frickin' Donkey Kong legit,
Yeah.
and
Wi
I
is there any other style, Sean? No.
what I mean, why delay the inevitable? I mean,
That's right.
get in
Yeah.
front of the trajectory. I know I'm going to be hand milling some ancient flower like that can only be grown, on full moons or whatever, something ridiculously insane,
Yeah.
some sort of difficulty put in front of my nose. So I was like that close to pulling the trigger, and I had a change of heart right about the time that all of this, social media was starting to rev up with, hey, you should get in front of a microphone. So I mean, it's not that they overlapped each other, but they were almost back to back,
Mhm.
and I want to think that I dodged a bullet, man, because I'm better over here in front of a microphone than in front of a freaking
A
ancient
flour mill?
stone milling device.
Yeah.
I mean, I would
Hey,
have loved taking over Canada, but it would have been a whole lot of work, and it would have required such a big team, and then now you're not in the game of creating change, you're in the game of leading change, and I wanted to be in the game, not like, sitting behind a desk and making phone calls and sending emails to try to maintain a national frickin' mission. So
yeah, General Taylor's flour. I mean,
General Taylor's flour mill, yeah,
yeah,
precisely. It would have
yeah.
been ridiculous, so I'm glad I got out of it.
It's funny you say that though, because my wife and I, 2 weeks ago, I was looking up stone mill grinders, and we were thinking about
Ah, yes.
taking, maybe 3, 4 acres
German.
of our what's that?
German.
Oh god, the sky's the limit, dude. Like,
It is. that's
I don't
that's
even
why I
know.
ask.
I
That's
don't
why I
even know,
ask.
but I would imagine
Yeah,
the best manufacturers are probably European ones.
European. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's where you'd want to go. If I'm, but you're gonna pay. But I mean, if you're in it for the like long haul, it's worth looking at the European product for sure.
Couple $1,000 for a small stone mill.
Yeah.
And, we're still thinking this, honestly. We're still thinking about it, maybe putting aside about 3 to 5 acres of our hayfield. We've got about a
Mm,
40-acre hayfield,
mm.
and, eventually doing our own wheat. There's also other products
It,
out there,
you
right?
know
There's
whether
lots of other things.
whether you do your own wheat or whether you bring in like heirloom grains from
Yeah.
another producer that you trust, organic, etc., create some relationship with them. Bringing in an heirloom grain and then grinding it yourself, fresh flour is different than dead flour, and so that's that. I mean, dude, I was so close to pulling the trigger on it, and because there's a difference, man. It's like coffee. I manually ground my coffee this morning just before I came into this. I'm only a couple of sips into this,
Yeah.
and I had to manual grind because my wife stole the electric grinder and took it to her girls' getaway. They're
Oh, I
doing
was
an
wondering why you
oh,
had
dude, it's
the
so
little dial
ridiculous.
grinder.
My wife
Yeah.
didn't not even a little note like enjoy manually grinding or good luck. Nothing. Just a
Yeah.
little grinder sat there on the counter when I woke up in the morning. She was gone to the race already.
Nice.
So there is a difference between fresh ground flour and bagged flour, just like there is fresh ground coffee and coffee that is being ground for even 2 or 3 hours, the oxygenation rate of that coffee bean gets turned into a football field once it's ground down. So it's all the surface exposure and all of the rapid oxidation impacts that then, depending on how long you leave it, now you're facing with flour. It's starting to get a hint of rancidness,
Mhm.
So I mean, stone ground fresh flour. I mean, it's just like the apex predator of breads, I feel.
Oh, I can't imagine what it would be like, dude, because the homemade bread we make, the either the sourdough or the quick rise white bread that we make, it's like you said, it's the difference between Folgers and
Yeah.
your your best coffee on
Yeah, for sure. For
that
sure.
you that you do. So it's someday.
But
There's too many things you can do. The sky's the limit for
but that's a
farming,
problem.
right?
Yeah,
Right?
that's a problem. There's there isn't, because there's 1,000 things that you could do that with, but then there's the old saying, how you do one thing is how you do 1,000 things.
Yeah.
How you do one thing is how you do 10,000 things. And
True.
so, it's inevitable. I mean, you either do it one way, or are you even doing it? And so, like this in my head, the moment that I'm thinking flour, I'm thinking I own I own a manual stone grinding mill.
Mm,
That's just the way my head works. It's just
yeah.
timeline. It's
Yep.
definitely going to happen. And so then I have to run the math. Like, should I get it up front and amortize it out across the haul? Or should I save my pennies moving towards the inevitability of buying the manual stone grinding device and buy it when I have all the pennies available?
Yep.
And then I've missed 5 or 8 years of not having it, which bums me out, but I love
Mhm.
playing 2 games. I love knowing where I'm going, and I love saving my money to get to it, and then I love executing, because then it's like a recognition of, "Yeah, I ground that out," pun intended. And
Yep.
then there's the other aspect is buying it now, amortizing it out, and then it's the free full commit. It's like, well, usually I save and buy, but now I'm amortizing out. So I'm like doubling the game. It depends on what game I want to play. So, but it, inevitably, how I do one thing is how I've done everything. So,
Yeah.
all
So
in.
you have to be careful what you're
I
choosing
have
here.
to be very careful with what I
Yeah.
choose. And I've said it out publicly for sure more times than I probably care to, that I have to be very careful with what I engage in, what hobbies I choose, what sports, the people. I mean, I'll invest in everything around me that I choose. And so I
Yeah.
have to carefully choose what I invest in.
Yeah, I not quite the same as you. I've maybe this is just the way I'm wired, but I've always found myself interested in everything.
Mhm.
And then what I find is instead of doing one thing really, really awesome, I'm trying to do a whole bunch of things. And you can't. You
No,
can't do 50 things and be amazing at all 50.
no,
So then there's a level of mediocrity built into the shotgun approach to that,
there
right?
is.
And there's no way around
Yeah.
it. You just can't. You have to either choose to be an expert in something because you're dedicating your several thousand hours to that one thing, or you're splitting up your several thousand hours, your repetitions, and then you're never achieving that level, right? You didn't get to 10,000 reps on anything because you're doing 10,000 things one time. And
That's right.
so as I've started to tip the scales of maturity, where I'm finally growing up like a big boy, right? I'm I'm recognizing that you can't have your hands in everything, and so big learning curve, especially in the farming business. It goes hand in hand with what you were saying and what I just said. Um, we want cattle, we want all of the things to be able to farm, but there's just no way to have that form of advanced capital when you buy a farm. We're not
Oh, yeah, for
generational
sure,
farmers,
for
dude,
sure.
like
Yeah.
we're already we're 600 beans into this place.
Yeah, and it's a tough gig. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
farming is a tough gig.
especially with the economy the way it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't even know if ever there was a time in history when it was easy.
Mm,
You know what I'm saying?
I don't think so, but
I
there
think there
are
was a period of time maybe in the 80s where there was enough. being made, and there was enough grants, and there's enough stuff. It felt like in the 80s, some of the farmers that I knew were doing okay, like pretty good,
Oh yeah.
but of course they work like dogs.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's ever been an easy gig, that's for sure.
No, it's what it is it's the labor to profit ratio that screws you
Mm,
as a farmer,
mhm,
right? Like, you might look at the lifestyle that a farmer has and think, "Oh, look at that. You got land and you're free to have your own food and everything." Yeah, you have to be willing to understand that level of investment and that ratio, right? Yeah, some farmers that I know, the guys that do cash crop around here and that have been
mm.
established for a long time, when crops are good, they make some money, right? They're selling their stuff, they're making a good coin. But 3 years earlier,
Oh, yeah,
when
it's
when the
cyclic, yeah.
season was
Oh,
terrible,
yeah.
they're paying their debts off. You don't
Oh,
realize
for
that,
sure, for sure.
right?
That's
So
that's always been the way, yeah.
yeah, it's like here's a flat line that describes a farmer's life, and then here's the cycle of the monetary advance and fall,
Yeah,
right?
for sure, for sure.
Right, and the farmer is always the thing that remains steadfast, and then his years of good and his years of bad kind of flow like the cross and
Yeah, for sure.
the crest and the trough of a wave, and we're seeing that firsthand as we're learning. We've only
Oh,
been in it
yeah.
3 years, and it's like, "Oh my god, another drought year? Yeah, right on, bring it
Yeah,
on."
yeah, yeah, so, a farmer, and to the point that you were making earlier about how you're starting to, not late focus on 50 things, and now maybe you've got it down to 5 things, it doesn't much matter. You're refining your, um, deeper exploration of various things. I've always said it as such, you're either a dabbler or you're a scrabbler. And so dabbling is like hitting 50 things and trying to understand all of the world around you, which I love doing. I mean,
Mhm.
I do dabble in the information world, our world. But I'm a scrabbler at heart. I like to scrabble down the rabbit hole. So I'm not just like I just don't want to be mediocre in a bunch of things. I don't mind being mediocre in some things, but
Mhm.
I absolutely need to be scrabbling deep down rabbit holes so that I feel like I'm true to me. Like I
Yeah,
just love to be seeking mastery in several things, not all the
yeah.
things, just several things. And I don't even know what the next thing is that I'll seek mastery in, or whether I'll ever achieve mastery in anything. But I need to scrabble and I need less dabble in my life. But I know I've got brohemos that are flippity flop. I mean, they love the dabble. They're just
Mhm.
not into the Scrabble. And so you're a dabbler or you're a scrabbler. You can be both, but I think it's a good idea to figure out your ratio as you move through the phases of life.
Well, it's kinda like when an iceberg flips, if you think of it that way, or when you see, like, an iceberg that calves. I think that's where in my life, I use that metaphor to think of how I've started to mature. So, when I was doing the shotgun approach to life, it was like the entire iceberg of my experience was exposed. I was full on just mediocre at everything. So you can imagine an iceberg with I was only good at a few things, but it was all hidden underwater. And now
Mm.
the iceberg is calved, so to speak, in this analogy, and the maturity is coming along in my 40s. It's so weird for I'm in my 40s and all of a sudden I'm finding maturity. I thought I would have found it 20 years ago, but it
No,
isn't. Ah, and
no,
most
not at
men that I
all.
know are in the same boat. When you're in your
Yeah.
20s, you're just starting to figure out how to be a man. And then your 30s, you learn a bunch of things and you start to kind of put the pieces together. And then all of a sudden, bam, whoa, holy cow, this is what it's like to be an adult. I'm in my 40s.
Well, you know what? You'll find this interesting. I do believe a quick little story, maybe 2 minutes, not even. So when I was your age, I hopped onto social media. Of course, I was well into computer system engineering by then, and I was all over the interweb doing all kinds of stuff. But I wasn't really creating social media at all.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did have a little account, uh, and it was a blogger account, believe it or not. And I did put up something again when I was about your age, and I called it the inverted triangle theory.
Mm,
And it's much like your iceberg comment that you just made, which reminded me of my inverted triangle theory, or I also called it the inverted pyramid theory.
yep.
And that is, you a lot of people feel that in life you've got to get a really solid foundation, and as you build your foundation, you start moving up towards the apex of the pyramid, and that's where the enlightenment occurs. But
Mm,
I feel like I've run my life flippity flop. I've been running the inverted pyramid theory in my pursuit, and that is the tip of the pyramid is now at the bottom, and that's where I'm standing, looking at the immensity of the pyramid
mhm.
expanding out beyond me, out upon the horizon. And uh and
Yeah,
and
by the
so
way, thanks for joining us.
yeah, of course. And so like I've
Uh,
the inverted pyramid at one point for me was just standing at the tip of the pyramid looking up and not even understanding how wide it went. So
mm,
that's how I started viewing my anything that I engaged in was the inverted pyramid theory. So that was at your age. And
yep.
so now at my age, nearly 20 years later, when I started talking about that theory, it's only been maybe the last 2 years, not even, maybe the last 18 months, that I realized the body of work that I created because I never talked about it. I
Yeah.
never thought about it. I never freaking like really owned it per se. And it was like when people just kept telling me, dude, do you realize you did? Do you know you have you has it sunk in that you used to be a because I just honestly I didn't think much about it. I just kept on going up the pyramid and seeing how wide it went until
Mhm.
people started titling me or categorizing me. And now it's in my freaking Instagram bio. I've owned it so much that I've actually typed out the titles that I own. I never
Yep.
used to think about that stuff. I didn't actually think I was that guy. I just I just kept moving forward and creating not a new guy, but adding to the guy that I was without really considering what I'd accomplished in life. So it's been the last probably 18 months where I've watched my own iceberg calf and
Mm,
I've sat back and thought like, "Oh wow, yeah, I guess." I never really thought about it, but there's that. And
yeah.
so it's kind of a weird moment for me as well, this consideration.
Well, and in keeping with this iceberg theme, that's what everybody is really. If you look at people, all you see is the tip of their iceberg,
Mhm.
right? If somebody meets you and they see you, let's say at a coffee shop, and they get to know you a little bit, they're only going to know tiny little thing. And it's the tip, right? It might be that they find out because generally when we share things, it's not like we share that we've successfully raised 5 dogs in our life. That's like the
That's
bottom
right.
of the iceberg,
That's
right?
right. That's
Right?
right.
You
Yeah.
would share something more important, the tip of the thing that you happen to be. All of the stuff that's sort of like at the base or underneath um what is visible to you, the public, that's not necessarily as important to people, but it is the buildup of who you are. It does create
Mhm.
that base. Even
But
though
the
when
the
you
the tip's different for each person, though.
oh,
For every
sure,
person in that coffee lineup, they all see a different little tip of the iceberg.
sure.
Because in order to interact with them, I'm gonna be talking about maybe they'll learn about my dog before they learn about me used to being a sniper. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Each person gets
Yep.
their own little boutique, moment, that I try to figure out if this is gonna be a thing or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's you are you are a single thing for every interaction in your life. And it
That's true.
makes you end up becoming literally thousands of things
That's true.
as you move through life. You are a perspective. And the reason that you happen to become all of these thousands of things is not because of you. It's because of the world view of you,
Mhm.
because everything else is viewing you in a singular perspective.
Mhm.
You always are the point, right? You're always the center point of your universe, and everybody else is observing you in a very subjective way. So in that sense, you always become a new thing, and then you accumulate these literal thousands of Sean's tens of thousands maybe, because you travel and you move around and you have a great experience in life. And I can think on my own life and think, how many thousands of times has a person created me in their mind? And now that's a me in out in the world. Even though I'm the center point of the actual
Yeah, that's legit.
Jason Subkowicz universe,
Hmm.
every single interaction I've ever had in my entire life creates a perspective of me that becomes me. Even though it not necessarily carried in me, it doesn't matter. Every single person that interacts with me carries me as what they perceive me to be. And that's interesting because
It is. Yeah.
that makes us not just one thing. It makes us tens of thousands of things throughout our life, right?
Yeah, and by the way, so over the last 18 months, I've kind of it's not that it's been head shakingly eye opening, but it has been an interesting thing to observe as kind of like a impartial observer of my life is paying attention to what other people think I am and what other people believe I am because of what I've done. And
Mhm.
so, dude, I sometimes each week I sit back in my chair and think, oh yeah, right. I guess I can see why you would think that. So, like, I get new realizations from people who have these either assumptions of who I am or um, who or maybe have a keen eye. Maybe they're a keen observer and they see something in me from my past and they want to talk about it. And in the process, though the experience that they want to talk about is an experience that I have in my life and that I can easily talk about um, and easily go back and forth for however long the person wants to talk about it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
While I'm talking with them, it often reminds me of how little I've thought about some of the things that I've accomplished in my life. Because I am a guy who just likes to do it and then move on to the next thing. And so I have been talking recently about reflecting on your life and all of that good stuff. But you know, I am uh, I might be the chimney sweep in the town. The guy who's got the dirtiest chimney is the chimney sweep. And so like I talk about reflecting on your life, but it's not something that I've done all my life. I've done it sporadically throughout my life, but over this last little period, I've been intently focusing on my life as a retroactive consideration or how I could have done it better or how I did it well. And so it has been a fairly recent deep dive on Shaun by Shaun that has taught me a lot about myself and taught me a lot about the world. And that wouldn't have happened unless, or to the degree that it is right now, that wouldn't have happened if the internet or the people who surround me were reaching in to me with their understandings of who I am or what they think I am. And it's caused not challenge me, but it's caused me to sit back and think about some things that I had really kind of fluffed off as it's not a big deal. Yeah, big deal. I climbed Mount Everest backwards with no oxygen. Big deal. That kind of stuff. I just didn't really think about these things and
Yeah.
so now I am and it's kind of a cool feedback loop to be honest.
Yeah, well, and you're touching on something that is surprising me in a way because I think this is another level of maturity in life. Y- Not only do you need to reflect on who you are, but you need to see why people look at you a certain way,
Yeah, precisely.
right? Because otherwise otherwise then you start having an ego battle because not everybody's going to think of you as inspiring or
Man, sometimes I don't
successful.
think that myself.
Yeah, but I mean, here's a good example. You're a very confident guy, and a person has created an image of Sean Taylor in their mind, and the why you are built like that in their perception is because of them, not you,
Hmm.
right? And it
Fair
has to
point.
do with their characteristics, it has to do with their upbringing, their environment, their socioeconomic status, their experiences in life, their failures and their successes. And so somebody gives you negative feedback because of how they perceive you, that's not a shot on you. And I've had to learn this. You've talked about it before, and
I
it's
have, I have.
basically like, don't let other people, um, don't worry about other people's opinions of you. However, I do think that you can learn a lot about humanity and about yourself when you look at how people see you. You can kind of start to understand that there's a deeper layer to why they see you the way they see you. Because if you are a world champion and you've been a world champion before, objectively, most of humanity would say, that's really amazing. You did an incredible thing. You rose to be the best in the entire world at something. But the person who wanted to be a world champion and for their own reasons ended up not achieving that level or failed, or I mean, you could fill in the blanks. They might look at you and think that you're an arrogant jerk. That has nothing to do with your actual objective success or who you are as a person. That has everything to do with their history. And so I've come up against struggles in relationships. You and I have talked on the phone about this a few times. You know what I'm talking about. And now I'm realizing that you kind of have to approach people with a level of empathy when they see you as something that you don't see yourself as, especially when it's negative. And if you happen to know anything about that person, that might give you a deeper sense of empathy or compassion as to why they are acting a certain way towards you. And, it just kind of goes hand in hand. You got to discover yourself, but I think you also, in order to discover yourself, you need to know why you perceive people a certain way too, because you're building perception the exact same way as everybody else. And when you look at somebody and you have a negative reaction to that person, or you think down upon them, or perhaps you look at them and you think you're better than them, look in yourself and wonder why. Ask yourself, why do I think I'm better than that person? Why do I think they're arrogant? What is it about me judging their perception that creates this disharmony between two people? Why am I creating them as a negative person in my life? Often the answer is going to be inside, and that's a big pill to swallow. That's tough. And I don't want I won't disclose what you and I have talked about, which is something personal in my life, but I've had to reflect on that and see it's my perception that is skewing my ability to have an empathetic and understanding viewpoint of another person in my life. And that may very well be why you're doing that with other people, why you're creating a negative perception in your mind of somebody. It's probably because of you, not because of them.
Yeah, I like that. And so here's my thought. And this is not my strategy. This is not my advice to Jay. This is not my advice to anyone. This
Mhm,
is just you and I chatting.
mhm.
And in the real time, bubbling ideas bubble up. And so just the other day, I put a post up on my Instagram, and it was the importance of understanding fast thinking and deep thinking.
Mhm.
And in my
Yeah,
post,
I saw that, yeah.
right. And so in my post, I stated that I try to do 2 deep thinking cycles per day.
Mhm.
One I've already done before we came on this podcast, as I stated in my Instagram post. Before I do microphone time, I try to do a deep thinking cycle. And
Yeah.
that's why I asked you. Thank you, buddy. That's why I asked you to delay between 0800 and 0900 PST so that I
That's
could,
your zen time.
as I said, I got to get my Zen time in.
Yeah.
So thank you. So the other piece is, as I stated, that once I'm finished all my microphone time for the day, I'll get another deep thinking cycle in. And so, to my point, fast thinking is my default mode. So and that's the way I've always been. And I actually kind of pride myself on it to some degree, how fast I think,
Mhm.
how fast I understand the world around me. And that's literally the reason that I put that post up. I didn't have time to build it out the way I wanted to, because it would have been half a book. But I love fast thinking because it requires action orientation, it requires pattern recognition, which I feel I'm pretty good at. And it also requires instinct and intuition. And
Mhm.
so that's my default mode, and I operate really well with that. And so I'll look at it, I'll walk up on someone that I don't know, and as I'm either looking them in the eye from 100 feet away, or as I'm reaching out my hand, or when I connect my hand, or if I put my hand on their shoulder, if we just walk past each other, those are all different moments, but I'm always getting a read on someone. I'm always feeling the world around me. I feel energy. And so in that moment, I'm making an assessment of a person that I've never met before. My fast think makes rapid determinations, as yours would as a police officer. Of course, it's literally a job that is that demands fast think mode.
Mhm.
And so, because that's my normal operating state, because I'm really good at it, I feel I like to use it more than I should. And so, as I'm walking up on someone that I've never met, I've made like instant determinations on them. I've plotted their history, like their last 20 years, who they are, what they've been up to. I'm
Yeah.
plotting the now, and I'm plotting their future, like trying to understand who they are, like the totality of everything about them as much as I can in a half second ish
Yeah.
or less. And so that doesn't serve me well all the time. Like if I get it right 9.5 times out of 10, well, there's a point 0.5 that I'm screwing it up. And
Mhm.
so that requires deep think. So fast think is prone to errors because it is a rapid determination that is built on pattern recognition and instinct and intuition in order to figure out this person like right now.
Mhm.
And over a long period of time, if you've seen enough extremeness in the world and faced enough bad characters and good characters, not just homogenous, mediocre, middle of the road life. That is not, you're not good at fast thinking if you've lived a mediocre life. You've got to have lived like a pretty wacky do life to be really good at fast think, I feel. And so if you're really good at fast think, eventually you're going to make errors. And so now to my point, you getting a read on an individual, you may have been fast thinking that moment in your default state for quite a while and not like done a pattern interrupt on yourself and said, man, I need like a week or two of deep think state purely on this topic of this particular problem, and I need to let this bubble up. I need to let this stew for a while. I need like, and I know it's going to sound dumb, I need to commit 10 deep think blocks to this problem or
Mhm.
challenge or what have you. And so no one really thinks like that, man, that I've talked to. No one assigns deep CPU cycle time to a problem. What they do, or at least this is what I did for a long time, was I stayed in my default mode of fast thinking the problem. And occasionally, when I had a bit of time, if I was relaxed, maybe, maybe the fast think problem would enter into my mind and I'd start maybe solving it. But it was
Yeah.
almost like randomized. It wasn't like I had a directed holistic process of fast think, deep think. Now that's what I do. That's what I do now. And it is working very well for me. But there was a time when I was like fast thinking and deep thinking through the world without an overarching strategic approach to deep think, fast think. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like having a QRF and a recce team,
Yeah,
right?
for
They
sure.
both they both are important. You need to have a quick reaction force, but you need Overwatch as well. You need somebody that's able to gather intelligence, right?
Yeah, you
You
need
need
a
to be
deep
able.
insert, is what you need. You need a freaking mole. You need a mole
Well,
in your
sure,
head.
yeah, you need spy. Yeah, you got to have your own spy, I guess. Eh? That's kind of like that's what I was thinking when you said that. Is um, yeah, fast thinking is like your quick reaction force. And then the deep thinking is more like that recce team or that Overwatch. That's
Yeah, that works for me.
gathering intelligence and looking from far away and seeing the bigger picture. That's also, ancient Eastern philosophy has that built in. You listen to any samurai, you listen to Miyamoto Musashi. There's another real famous. I don't know if he was a samurai, but he was definitely a Japanese philosopher, and he said something about, you know, you, and it's classic. You can't see the forest for the trees, right? If all
Mm,
you do is concentrate on the leaf, you can't see the tree. If all you do is concentrate on the tree, you can't see the forest. You have to look closely and you have to look far away,
you
right?
do.
Shoot with both eyes open, have one in the scope and one seeing the landscape.
Mhm.
And in order to think properly, I think you need to have both, which is the deep thinking and the quick reaction thinking.
Yeah, and you're a longtime martial artist, and so you'll be very familiar with this, not protocol, but this approach to fighting another human. And that is, of course, first things first, you're going to eyeball the hands. As you know, as a police officer, it's kind of mandatory. And
Yep.
so once you've got a sort of a sense of the hands, where they're at, what they're doing, what the person's intention is, as you also know, you just don't target lock in the hands and start tracking hands as they're moving around. Oh, it's in a pocket now. Now it's
Mhm.
scratching their head. I'm all about the hands.
Yeah.
That is not what happens. You get an instant read on the person. You're eyeballing their hands, and then while you're doing that, as humans, apparently we can't do several things simultaneously. We can't truly multitask.
No.
We can only focus on one thing at a time. We just rapidly shift our attention back and forth to various minor points.
Yep.
So I feel like I do that so freaking fast. I don't want to say that I can multitask. I want to say that I move things so fast and I understand the totality of the situation in front of me so rapidly that it feels like I'm multitasking, though perhaps I'm not. And
Mhm.
so, you, as an experienced martial artist, don't walk up to a person, target lock on their hands and not look anywhere else. You start absorbing the situation in front of you. You're paying attention to the gross motor movements and you're paying attention to the nuance of how they're blading or not, their
Mhm.
stance. And so you pick up all of these body language hints that you might be aware of, but the person down the street isn't aware of because they haven't been in the game long enough to feel the moment. Now, you can call it you're paying attention to details, or you can call it I feel what's about to happen. And so that becomes just a matter of how many times have you stood in front of a bad guy and felt the moment in order to pattern recognize or delineate between bad guy A, bad guy B, and bad guy C. They're all three different bad guys. From a surface perspective, they're all got their hands in their pockets and they all kind of feel a bit threadish. But from a nuance perspective, with lots of experience and lots of pattern recognition and intuition, instinct, and action orientation, all three bad guys are very different by paying attention to the nuance of the moment, feeling the moment rather than seeing the moment. Those are two different things. And if you've been
Mhm.
in the game long enough, seeing and feeling are not the same. And so, Jay is an experienced martial artist and experienced police officer. You could step up on that moment and feel what's about to happen well before you see any hands. And so, for anyone out there that gets involved in making assessments of a situation as as a as a white belt in determining life, there's so many signals that you don't see. I mean, you're oblivious to a lot of the frequency, a lot of the energy, a lot of the things that are going on behind the curtain. You just don't see them. You just don't feel them. You don't hear them. You don't smell them. You're just not aware. But the more you're in the game of understanding that we all can peel back layers of the curtain to see what's truly going on in the moment, you become the Wizard of Oz rather than wondering what's behind the curtain. You are the guy behind the curtain. But
Mhm.
that can only be achieved by peeling back layers of perceptive perception of the moment, or the perceived reality of our world.
Yeah, well, there's a mindfulness to that. Setting martial arts aside for a second, I'll bring up our wives. And If your spouse walks into the house after a day at work or wherever they had been and they're not having a great day, before you start to question, I wonder what's going on with my spouse, you feel it.
Oh yeah.
Dude, if you're interconnected with somebody, whether it's your wife or your mother, your children, maybe a really close friend, you know, there's just something that you feel, right? That's that's time on the mat. We've said that out loud a few times. There are perceptions that the human has that are built deep within our subconscious routine. And it's mindfulness that teaches you to pick up on those senses instead of ignoring them and questioning, what is it about this energy I'm feeling that's off? We all sort of seem to ignore these innate qualities that are built within us that I don't know if we're de-evolving them so much as that we just don't use them enough to be aware of them, to be aware that we do recognize micro expression well before somebody says, I'm having a bad day.
Mm.
We pick up on a person's energy when they're in the room close enough to us before they say, oh, my boss freaked on me. They walk in. If you're mindful enough to be picking up on that energy, if you've developed that relationship with somebody, you're going to sense it. And um, my martial arts career started when I was just a little boy, and by the time I was a teenager, I was fighting at a pretty high level in, these were all stand-up tournaments because mixed martial arts didn't exist back in the day, so,
Mm, mm.
you know, since taekwondo was a stand-up fighting type of thing, it was the tournaments were kung fu, karate, taekwondo, aikido, all of the various stand-up type of,
Yeah, traditional martial arts, TMA. Yeah.
yeah, and it was an interesting type of fighting system. There was some violence in it, but what I'm getting at is, when you're the white belt, you're looking for a 20-mile-an-hour fist, right? And by the time you're tying on your purple or your brown belt, you're seeing the twitch of a shoulder, right? Or you're seeing the shift of a hip, or you're seeing the change in the way that a person's holding their hands in order to affect a new thing, right? And that's the nuance that you start to develop when you become mindful and you practice these things over and over again. We've already covered communication in our podcast on episode 1, and now we were kind of talking about life and seeing things differently. If you're oblivious to this stuff, you'll never pick up on it, but you'll always have something kind of at the back of your head, kind of like scratching at you, trying to tell you something, and you'll be thinking, what is this? What am I missing here? And as you develop this mindfulness to be aware of your surroundings, when you learn to see the forest for the trees, when you're able to look closely and far away and pick up on those things, you'll understand that there's a reason why. It seems to be built into us. For some, it's not strange, I don't think. What it is that we've just gone away from it. Humans are just so busy. Our lives are so overcome by stimulation that I believe it's drowning out our natural and innate ability to sense things before we can consciously put them into language and verbally express them. I think we do notice them beforehand.
I think that so I'd mentioned fast thinking, and I'd stated that you kind of require, you need to be action oriented. You need instinct, intuition, and that instinct and intuition is the tricky part. We've all got instinct.
Mhm.
We all have intuition. Now, there's a bit of an argument out there about what intuition means and if it's even real, if it's just a matter of pattern recognition and offloading the patterns into a belief that you have intuition. So, you start seeing something shape up in front of you, a circumstance, and as you're interpreting the circumstance, it's simply a repeated pattern that you've seen 10,000 times, and the very next step. So basically, you can use some fuzzy predictive math through pattern recognition and start kind of seeing the future. If that future is 1 second from now, 10 seconds from now, 3.5 minutes from now, depends on how you understand the world and how long you've been reading the future, as it were, through intuition. So there's intuition forecasting or future seeing, and then there's intuition that is the moment. And so the moment being, as humans, at one point, we didn't live in big cities. We didn't live in big sky rises. We didn't live in cars. We lived out in freaking nature. That wasn't too long ago.
Mhm.
And while we're out in nature, we had threats called mountain lions and bears and all the things. And so there were threats out there to include other humans. And so while we're living out there, either in our cave or out in the savannah or whatever the case is, sitting at a campfire in the middle of the night, hoping that nobody raids our little campfire, all of that time is different than this time now in our modern world, because we have all this white noise around us as we walk down the sidewalk, as we're moving through the office cubicle space. We've got all this white noise around us, called all of this stimulus, all of these people, all of this movement, all of this noise, all of this sensory input has been normalized into just background life that
Mhm.
really doesn't have much threat per se, in context of facing a campfire and having your back exposed to the probable mountain lion of 400 years ago. And so those are two different threat matrices. And so while you're at the campfire, you have the opportunity to feel what's going on around you, because there isn't that much sensory input. There's the crackle of the fire, there's the warmth of the fire, there's the dancing shadows, there's the smell, but it's quite an isolated frequency in context of what surrounds you in the pitch black behind you. You hear a twig crack off your right flank, 200 meters behind you. You're freaking snapping your head like, what is going on back there?
Mhm.
What is going on back there in the dark? But that doesn't happen in the skyscraper. That doesn't happen in the office. No one snaps their head over when they hear the fax machine start up. It's all just white noise of your surrounding. And so the intuition is kind of being beaten out of people through the frequency of the constancy of noise. There's no one's really tuning into the office. The office tunes you out.
Mhm.
And so now you're at the campfire. Now you're hearing cracks behind you in the dark. It gets to a point where if you survive the night, you have to like start relying on your sixth sense. And I've talked about sixth sense before. There's people who believe that it isn't a thing. Well, it isn't a thing for you, bro. If you've never felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up because you feel someone staring at you behind you.
Mhm.
If you don't know that feeling of being stared at from the shadows, maybe 2 stories up, maybe with a high power optic, if you've never felt that and felt that someone is looking at you and evaded and moved to cover and wondered what is going on and then spotted that that's what's going on, of course you don't understand sixth sense because you've never experienced it. The only way to experience sixth sense is to start focusing on the now, focusing on what you feel, stripping out all the white noise bandwidth, and getting to a place where you can have a clearer mind with a clearer frequency path, like nature. You get out and sit on a tree stump for an hour, and if there's even squirrels around you, you're going to start working on your sixth sense.
Mhm.
That's all there is to it. It doesn't mean that by the end of the day you're going to have a sixth sense. It just means that you're tuning into the world now in a different way, in a thoughtful way, not a thoughtless way. And it takes a lot of iterations until you feel someone looking at you from the shadows. But I've done it and still do it. I have friends who have done it and still do it. Once you felt it, once you understand its power, why would you give it up? Why would you give up another sensory input, a sixth sense of input?
Mhm.
Well, if you gave it up, I mean, I don't even understand the person that stands in front of me that would give that up willingly. But I also don't understand people who willingly give it up before they even get it. People will put up their hands and say, whatever, man, sixth sense. Who needs that? I've got five. I don't
Yeah.
understand that either.
Yeah. Well, 100%. Instinct should be labeled as another sense. It should be labeled as another perception that we have.
Sorry, intuition.
Well,
Instinct would be like, someone grabs you by the shoulder and you wrap that up, and that's your instinct kicking in. That is your almost like not autonomous, but it is your immediate go to, your immediate action drill of when someone does this, you do that. If a pencil, as you're writing with it, if the pencil lead snaps, the instinct is to go and then grab the pencil sharpener. And so instinct is the sort of the rote or patternized instant action that you don't have to think about a lot. It is your instinct, but your intuition is a feel, is feeling the world around you. That's how I distinguish between the two.
yeah, I was gonna say, intuition is like looking at your instinct,
Yeah, I agree with that. Yes.
right? It's
Yeah,
it's more it's more of an emotional thing where I think that because we have this incredible executive function built into the neocortex that we are able to defy our instincts. What we have now is we have a two-layer system. And intuition is the higher layer, which allows us to stare into our instincts and then choose the one that's appropriate based on culture and society or situation. Because, like you said, we're not being chased by saber-toothed mountain lions anymore, but we still have an instinct to fight or run if we hear a twig snap. So then
hmm,
we have to intuit whether or not to act on that instinct. It's kind of how I think of instinct
yeah, that
versus
works. That
intuition,
works. Yeah,
right? And I I'm lucky in a sense, Sean, that the way that I lived my life so far and the way that I was raised and the activities that I did, especially martial arts, and then second to that, being in the policing world, um, you had to evaluate your intuitions all the time against your instinct. You'd be clearing a
agreed.
building, or you're gonna be going through you're gonna be breaching a threshold, and the threat is unknown, and so you're the hairs are already standing on end as you're breaching the threshold, but you have no intuition yet until you're presented with something. And then you have to intuit what your reaction is going to be based on your instincts, right? You, as a police officer, you're going to encounter, or as a military personnel, you breach the door and it's six people in the room and only one has a weapon. You immediately have to figure that out, right? And not only do you don't just start randomly doing things because they're all a threat, you're figuring out which is the threat. So you're determining this, and there's a fine line. And what do you do other than to train for this? I don't know. Like I said, I'm lucky that I did martial arts for so long that it allowed me to work on these sensations. Being a police officer and always having to respond to things without a whole lot of information and with having to rapidly and in real time change based on the stimuli that's in front of you, you really do develop a pretty decent ability to work through instinct and intuition and kind of synergize those things so they become almost like one thing. And I've had examples in my life where um, I react properly to a situation before I have even consciously thought of the reaction.
For
It is
sure.
just like I trust myself now that if something arises, I'm going to do the thing that I need to do. I'll give one quick example of that. My wife and I were driving on a road trip. I had a big coffee in my hand and I was just talking to her about something that happened in a rural area. We were on the highway heading out of town. We were doing highway speed and both of us looked to the left and I was not paying attention to the road in front of me. And the car in front of me at highway speed had stopped to turn. And I got, you can call it luck or just the way that my life has played out. But because I have developed these instincts to react immediately, I was able to just swerve around the car with one hand, drive into the ditch, avoid a telephone pole, and end up in a field without even spilling my coffee. And then at the end of it, I realized that it was all done without any sort of conscious or higher level inputs. It just occurred. And we live in a time now where you don't often need those skills.
Mm,
Most people throughout the day, the stimulus comes through their computer screen or their boss tells them to do a job or their children come to them and tell them that they have this problem, and there's always time and there's always a delay available, and you're not ever in a situation where you're having to build those instinctual muscles and use intuition to determine whether your instincts are proper or not. You know, if you're hearing a stick break, is it your spouse or is it a lion? Um, what other options are there for people other than to practice mindfulness, I guess? I don't know. I guess I'm kind of asking you because you're in it in a deeper way, and you're at a more mature part of your life where you've had opportunities to speak about this and think on it more deeply. What does a person do? How do we
Well,
how do we tap into these in a better way? Because
well,
so many
it's a
people,
great
it's just
question,
it's atrophied to a point where their default mode is just to freeze or fawn, and they don't
and that
have
is it.
those. Yeah, they don't have
You're
those
right on the
abilities,
money.
right?
Yeah. Uh, it's a great question, and you're right on the money. And so these are things that I have been thinking about for a long time, and I do have answers for Sean, but I don't know if I've got answers for everyone. I'll just tell
Mm,
you how I've done it, and how I continue to do it, like on the regular, every day. I work on, I'll call it a skill, but it's my sixth sense, and
mhm,
so what it requires for me is to contain my disbelief on what a human can accomplish. And so it's the lie you tell yourself that becomes the truth. And so I had to I had to stand outside of doors before a breach and and project myself into the room and tell myself, believe that this was the truth. I had to believe that I could stand outside the door and feel what was inside the room. And so once the door kick was done, we'd enter the room, and at tier 1 level, things move in split seconds.
mhm.
And so the issue within the room is taken care of in very short order, a matter
Yeah,
of 2 to 3 seconds kind of thing. And
yeah,
so but the moment that that is occurring, the moment that I'm sweeping into the room and doing whatever it is to basically and own and encompass the entire room, the moment that I'm doing that is also the moment that I'm punching forward into the next space. And so as I observe and absorb what's in front of me, I'm also making note of all of the, we'll call them tactical issues, like, oh, there's a door there and there's no other doors in the room. And that's where we're going next. Just
mhm,
simple observational decisions. But the moment that that is noted, I'm punching through that door using my mind and trying to put my sixth sense into the next room. Before I know
mhm,
what's in there, I'm trying to be in there. I'm trying to feel what's through that wall. Is it possible? I think so because I've done it. Is it real? I believe so because I've seen it be real.
mhm,
Is sixth sense a thing? Not for you or anyone else if you never start. If you never tell yourself the lie so that it becomes the truth of,
mhm,
we're all capable of doing it. The struggle is believing that we can do it. And so you've got to get past the first part of, it just seems like it's really dumb and bogus, and that's just goofy nonsense and it doesn't exist. So you got to get past that part of the intellectual disbelief that it's even a thing. And then you've got to engage in it, like actively freaking work on your sixth sense, which it takes a while. It's a phase of discomfort where you're literally questioning whether you've not gone crazy, but questioning whether this is even a thing. And it's the randomness of any skill mastery or any skill uptake. You know, you if you're starting to make pottery, not every freaking pottery session is cracking out amazing bowls on day one. You make 1 out of 10. There's mud on the
mhm,
wall, there's mud on you. Your bowl's all wonky and you're quite proud of it. But, you know, 1,000 times later, you're making 6 out of 10 bowls. And eventually you're making 10 out of 10 bowls. And then eventually you're the bowl master. And
Yeah.
so that is life, man, in everything. And so with something that is so not quite nebulous, but ephemeral on on a sixth sense basis, the very fact that you're trying to do something that most people don't believe are a thing is like a not a great place to start. And so
Mhm. Well, and
these these are
this isn't for everybody.
this is not for everyone. These are
Yeah,
leaps of faith. But
yeah.
so to your point, it is for everyone, for the people who believe that it's a thing. Just like religion isn't for everyone, except for the people who believe it's a thing. And
Mhm.
so the big leap is, you know, within some religions or most religions, faith is faith. You're having faith that a thing that you can't reach out and poke is a thing. We're
Mhm.
talking sixth sense
Yeah.
now. The comparisons are interesting to say the least. Few people will commit to sixth sense. Most of the world will commit to religion. Now, I'm not that guy that likes to talk about race, religion, or politics, but the it's striking similarities, no?
Sure it is. Sure it is. What's the difference? It's kind of funny because we did not talk about really what we were planning to talk about today because we kind of planned it out, eh?
That's
Um,
right.
but no, you I think so. I'm gonna try and build this out. Belief is belief different than intuition? Because a person who's religious is so captivated by their belief as to think that they are intuiting it from the universe. So, is there a difference between religious conviction and a mindful practice that allows you to sense other people? Mm. I don't know. That's a tough one. Um, the idea that you need to practice to feel the intuition and the instinct of humanity is also something that you'd have a hard time selling to a lot of people. But there are people out there that are looking to squeeze a little bit more out of life. And one of the things that I do more recently than not, one of the things that I do in this way is I try to be more mindful and feel and sense people when I'm around people. It kind of goes back to communication. Communication isn't just language and speaking to somebody. There is a way to sense a person. There is a way to feel a person when you're in the room with them, when you're communicating with them, when you're having a conversation. And you have to you have to use your own energy in order to extrapolate that from anybody else. You have to know yourself before you're going to ever know anybody. And so if you're happy just sort of floating through life and in a carefree sense, ignoring some sensory input, I think that's built into us that is maybe devolved or at least atrophied. Cool, man. Like I said, this conversation isn't for everybody. And the idea that we have more senses than what we take for granted, that there are deeper layers to us, that's on a personal level, that's going to be up to you to decide whether that's something important in your life. As I was listening to you talk, I was just trying to think, is there a way to really get anybody to understand how this works? How do I make myself feel or understand how this works? And I still struggle with it. I just don't know. It's very subjective. You have to decide. There's more to life. There are these gut feelings I have. There are these instincts that I either am for or against. When I enter a situation, when I see a person, when I'm in a room, when I'm part of a crowd, when I'm out in public, I get these feelings. And you can either just live your life ignoring them, or you can try and sit down with them and take those moments of deep thinking and reflection to understand what they are. I'm at a loss for words to try and promote during this conversation to other people how they go about increasing their ability other than to say you've just got to figure it out yourself and go do it. There's no magic pill on this. It has confused me for a very long time. What what we do with our instincts and our intuition when it comes to interacting with people, because we are so vastly different from one person to another. We have our own ideals, we have our own beliefs, and I can't all I can do is be me, and all I can do is understand me and use that as a way to try and understand the better world. And maybe that's a good starting point. I know you've promoted that many times and you say it, and I hear people that are in your shoes that have um, reached really high levels in something. You seem to have a really strong understanding of who you are. And probably that means that you've really deeply tapped into these instincts and these intuitions. And then they become a subconscious routine that you kind of observe. And then you can sort of tailor make it. And I'm thinking on myself now when I talked about I feel lucky that I had martial arts in my life for many, many years, and that I was a policeman for many years, and I was able to develop these markers of understanding my instincts versus creating instinct. I don't know if we create instinct, because I think instincts are innate evolutionary qualities in us. And now that we're living in modern times where our instincts are just basically hijacked, that's where intuition comes into play. That's where the higher thinking comes into play to determine whether these instincts are, in fact, uh, worth putting energy into or just ignoring. Like if you're walking down a nice path and you hear a stick break, are you really going to worry about the mountain lion jumping on your back if you know the area and the environment? Do you need to put a whole bunch of energy into that, or can you ignore it? If you're walking down the street of New York, if you're walking in New York in the dark at night and you hear something, should you be on high alert versus if you're walking in my hometown? Well, it's a big difference, right? And so what you've got to do is using all of the things that you have at your disposal based on your experience in life, you've got to more deeply look at your instincts to develop whether you're using your intuition in the right way. I just don't have another easy way to say this to somebody who thinks, what am I missing in life? Why am I always feeling these things but never understanding what it is? The mindfulness practice is being present, but it's also an accumulation of everything up to that point in your life. I mean, you're 60, so you've got 60 years of the past in order to look back on so that you can move your intuitions in the correct way. And without having ever introspected on your life in the past, how does a person ever do that? So maybe that is, after I've rambled long enough, maybe that is one of the keys, is that you've got to look backwards and see all of this and then try to glean the wisdom from it so that you can steer your intuitions correctly around your human instincts. I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you think on that?
I think that's a fair assessment. That's a fair overview of what we're talking about.
I
I
had to
tend
ramble for like 3 minutes to get that out.
no, no, I tend
It was
I
something
tend
there
to
and I
agree.
just couldn't get it. I just couldn't get it out until that very end, and it's like, I think maybe that's what it is instincts are innate, intuition is sort of higher level thinking, and then you move through that maze, making sure that you're using the energy of your intuition properly instead of improperly. You're not constantly worrying about the mountain lion because there's no mountain lions, right?
Well, let me draw the comparison then. So you'd stated that the difference between walking through your hometown and walking through New York are two different things. The
Mm,
noises that you hear are have meaning.
yeah.
And so yeah, they're different for you, but they're not different for everyone. And the reason that they're different for you is because you do the math. You understand the constructs, the two constructs. You understand the difference between two constructs in your mind. You have patterns for your town, you have patterns for New York. You understand the rhythm. You can cross-reference the rhythm. You can comparatively understand what's going on in the moment against your entire encyclopedia of life experiences. But those
Mm.
experiences are only like, they have a bandwidth that is super narrow if you don't think about life.
Yep.
But if you're a thinker, those experiences are super wide because you think about all of the bandwidth in all moments in life. Now, it's rare that any human, I've never met a human that has had full bandwidth containment because they're on full bandwidth alert for 60 years. It's just not how humans work. But
Yep.
if you can study the world around you to increase your bandwidth uptake and then start patternizing that construct, well, now you understand New York. And so, as a tourist stepping into New York, you're either going to get mugged because you're oblivious to the construct, or you're going to own the freaking town and turn it into Ferris Bueller's Day Off because you understand the bandwidth. How you move through the world is based on how you understand the world. If your life looks like it's a Ferris Bueller's Day Off every day, you freaking crack the code. You understand how to flow through the bandwidth of this energetic space that we're operating in. You understand the near future because you have good pattern recognition called intuition, and you can see the mugger walking towards you down the New York sidewalk. You already know where your wallet is, where your watch is. You already know what you're going to say. You already know how it's going to play out. You already know that you'll probably end up shaking the guy's hand and laughing at him and continuing on your way. You have all your moves ahead of time. You have the situation understood before it occurs if you have full bandwidth. But if you are full of white noise, narrow bandwidth, poor understanding of your constructs, then you don't have the contextuality to understand the next move. You don't even know that you're in New York. You're just in a place that has big buildings. And so your awareness through life is what determines your catalog of experiences. And the bigger your catalog, the better you make your move. And so for you in your town versus you in New York, you'd operate better in your town, but you wouldn't suffer in New York. It's because you've paid enough attention to the world. You've seen enough of the world. Even if you never left Ontario, your exposure to the world in Ontario is bigger than a lot of people's exposure to the world who've traveled the world because it was your job. You were mandated to pay attention. Whereas the CEO who's traveling around the world isn't mandated to pay attention to his office. It's nice if he does, but he's not obligated by duty to really pay attention to the citizenry. He's not obligated by duty to pay attention to why the lights on in that store at 2 o'clock in the morning when they should be off. These are things that within your life you may be obligated to do, or you can voluntarily choose to do, as I have. Obligation and volunteering to 100% pay attention to my world. Now, it doesn't mean that I got a lot figured out. It just means that I try to absorb the world's bandwidth like a freaking black hole. And it's
Mm.
not something that I've done all my life. But the moment that I realized that how to game this game is to play the game by absorbing the game, understand the game by gobbling it all up and turning it
Mm.
into a construct that is 100%, rather than dabbling my way through life and haphazardly or by happenstance gleaning a gem here and there as if it was fell out of the sky through luck. Wow, look at that. I just learned something about life. I ain't into chance. I'm into forging my path through life. I'm into puppet mastering my way through life. I am into frickin' running the game. Now, that's a whole different mindset. Now, anyone who's just heard that might think that that sounds like arrogant or egotistical or narcissistic or bizarre that I would say, I'm frickin' running this game, man. But if you don't believe that, what are you? You're a victim to the game. It doesn't mean that
Mm.
I'm controlling you right now, Jay. It just means that I'm holding my space, putting across my beliefs, engaging in a conversation open-mindedly, trying to pull wisdom out of you, and then carrying on with my day. No harm comes of that. The harm is that I don't believe that that's what I'm doing. And so I stopped disbelieving that a long time ago. I started believing that it's my game to run, and I'll fricking run it how I think it should be run. And that's what forms my friendships. That's what forms my relationships. That's what forms my worldview. If I was a jerk, my world would be full of jerks.
Mhm.
If I was a frickin' rock star, my world would be full of rock stars. And so it's my job to decide who I am and who I want to be surrounded by and what my world looks like. And I can tell you this, guaranteed, my world is frickin' awesome because I've made it so. But it
Mhm.
wasn't always awesome. And so I had to do something about it. And that is action orientation. That is the difference between hoping my world gets better and shaping my world so that it's frickin' mega. That's what I try to do. And again, if it sounds like I'm I'm saying crazy stuff, cool, man. But if you were in my shoes, if anyone was in my shoes, they'd be frickin' gobbling this down and trying to execute against it themselves if they understood how I play my game.
Mm. Let me see if I can recreate what you just said in because I love to make up metaphors and allegory in my head in order to understand things, and I think this is kind of this is kind of where you get if you practice this kind of mindfulness. So what I see in life is that there are some people that live on a single line of thought. So if you were to take moments and create them as little tiny invisible bubbles and then string them together so they looked like a necklace or a rosary, you would see a single line with all these little bubbles, and each one is a moment, and in each moment is either a decision or just a carrying on of the process of life. That's what I see a lot of people doing. The next moment carries them to the next bubble, to the next bubble, to the next bubble. And what you get like this beautiful string of pearls. It's just a big long line of their life with little dots along it. And then there are people who curate. You guys, I maybe I'm being influenced by the episode I just listened to you
That's
guys do,
right.
um,
But that's cool. That's cool.
but in this way, I'm trying to explain what I think your life is like, and to a certain degree, I think what my life is like, and I'm assuming, but I think that you'll probably understand this. So to go back on the analogy, the way that some of us seem to exist in life is that there is a line that comes up to an experience or a moment in time. And then what happens before time collapses back into the real moment, there's a branching off of all of the things that may occur in the experience or might happen because of X. So you're going to breach the threshold of a door. You're either going to go left or right. And that collapses at the real time the moment you make the decision. So there's a branching and then there's a collapse. Now you've dug that left corner and now you're going to go and you're going to sweep the rest of the room. So now what it's going on in your mind is you're looking at every scenario possible. If I go to the left and I see bad guy, I'm going to dump a couple rounds in him, but I've also got to sweep the rest of the room. So instantaneously there's all these lanes of experience in that moment that are occurring. You make a decision, you collapse that into real time, and there's the moment. And then the next thing occurs. And what you're doing is you're using prediction mechanisms built into the executive function. And instead of it being a singular line of experience, line, little experience, line, some of us, and I feel this way, some of us are constantly evaluating all the things that may or could occur. And then in real time, as it collapses, we've already predicted what might happen if A, or what might happen if B, or what might happen if I do C. And then in real time as it collapses, you've already predicted this in your mind, you've already played it out in your head, and your what happens in reality is based on these intuition and these instincts that you're playing out every single time something happens. So, I mean, it could be as innocuous as going to Safeway. I hate to say this, and people are going to think I'm crazy. And I used to worry about being hyper vigilant, but whenever I'm at a restaurant or anywhere in public, there's a certain way I act. And my kids know, and my wife knows. Daddy always sits with his back away from the door, and I never ever have my back to the door in a restaurant.
Same.
So I go to Safeway with my kids and I'm going through, it's not just me following a single trajectory in my life, going from the apples to the ground beef to it's what happens if I start hearing gunshots behind me? Where do I go with my children? What do I do? I play out all these scenarios all the time as I'm driving home. What happens if this happens? What happens if X? What happens if Y? When I was a police officer, radio goes off. We've got an assault in progress at this. Okay. I didn't mindlessly drive to the incident. What I did was, as I was going, until all of the avenues in my mind collapsed in real time in front of me, I was exploring all of the various lines of what may happen in my reality and evaluating them. And it goes on really quickly in your head. It's a very rapid process. It's that QRF kind of situation going on. And then the incident collapses in real time in front of me, and I've already in my past perceived the outcome of various options because I played them out in my head. And I also remember that that's how I learned how to fight in martial arts. That was the thing. You didn't just get in the ring and wait for a punch to come in, come flying at your head. You had to attempt, like you said, to predict the future, to see on the other side of the wall, even though you can't see what's beyond the other wall. So what you do is you create every possible scenario in your head as to what might be on the other side of the wall and how you're going to react to it. And then when the wall gets removed and you get to the scenario, everything collapses. Your executive function has predicted as many futures as possible. They coalesce into the one thing in front of you, and you are able to act on intuition and instinct in a more proper way because you've already played it out. You've already lived it in your mind. And in this way, it's more like instead of a single trajectory, it's like whoop, collapse to the reality. And then all these lines, and then they collapse to reality. And then all these ideas, and then they collapse. And in this way, it's totally different. It's non-linear. It has an, an innumerable variable built into it, and yet you think about them all and very rapidly in succession, and then when the real time moment happens, you've already done the outcome in your head, and it just seems to make things a lot easier. Do you live that way? Because I was concerned about hypervigilance in this way, and yet I find that it is beneficial to me, and I can do this in a mindful way now. I can do this where I'm I've already thought of what the moment is going to be, and so there's less surprise because I've already surprised myself in my mind. I've already predicted what might happen, and then when one thing happens, I've already had a plan.
So, two things. One is I do love a good analogy. And so you'd mentioned the rosary bead situation,
Yeah.
pearl after pearl after pearl, life moment after life moment after life moment. The reason that I like that analogy is perhaps for a reason that maybe you considered it. One of the things about rosary beads or working rosary beads is, as you full well know, it is a complete circle of beads.
Mhm.
And what you tend to do is you run through the entire circle several times if you're in the game for a long time. And so the rosary bead is like life. So, you're having your little moments and they're unfolding in front of you.
Yep.
And that rosary bead is not a complete circle until you go back through it again on reflection.
Mm.
What you had described as a rosary bead that is broken and stretched out in eternity in a straight line versus a
Ah, yeah.
rosary
Mhm.
rosary necklace that is a circle and that you get to work through in a correct on an
Mhm.
iterative basis. You get to revisit each moment as often as you like in order to go as deep as you want on that moment. So therefore what you get is multiple lives when you consider it as a rosary bead life, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Now, here's another thing that I'd like to throw at you. It's kind of a deep concept, and it's a bit trippy, but I'll throw it out there. And I was discussing this with my youngest son at the dinner table not too long ago. And as I title it, it is Parallel Universe, Shaun. And
Mhm.
so, my apologies to everyone who just rolled their eyes. And so, the idea is this: that as Jay is in the supermarket, he's doing his what ifs, if this, then that. The if this, then that sequence of events, an OODA loop, call it what you want.
Yep.
Jay is walking through the supermarket, not doing all of the hard math constantly in his mind, trying to figure out all the threats, trying to figure out all the responses. You're just doing life. You're moving through life. Perhaps you're moving through life with a sense of mindfulness, or perhaps you're not. But either way, you're moving through life and you're thinking about things. How you think is how you act, of course. But the moment that you act, you just created a parallel version of yourself. If you act shallowly, so if you thought about the moment shallowly, then the parallel J's that are thrown in that moment are maybe 10. But if you're a deep processor, if if this then that operative state is deep, is 1,000 J's in that moment. Well, the parallel universe is 1,000 J's got thrown in that moment. Now there's 1,000 J's out there in that moment in other universes. And so, how many J's do you want to create in your parallel existence? Every time you come up on a branching moment, if you go left, parallel J goes right. And now that parallel J is out there making his decisions in each branching moment. I'm branching off to eternity. And so I feel that like parallel Shaun has to see as many opportunities in the moment, has to consider the totality of the situation as best as he can to throw as many Shauns in that immediate moment so that all the other Shauns in the other parallel universes can go out there and be more Shaun rather
Mhm.
than less Shaun. And so, I mean, if you want to get really weird, I consider our world as, and I'm just going to use the gross analogy of the Force, Star Wars. And so you're either Luke Skywalker or you're Darth Vader. We'll keep it super simple. And so, if Luke's banging around doing good, that's what I want more Shauns to be doing than Darth Vader bad. And so every time I'm making decisions, I'm trying to make decisions that are more Luke Skywalker than Darth Vader.
Hmm.
Because then you start populating your universe with more good than bad. As I've
Mhm.
said to my wife several times, when I left the moment that I was driving away from Dwyer Hill Training Facility, the unit, and the fence was in my rear view mirror, the first thing I said to myself as I looked in that rear view mirror was, I'll never cross over to the dark side. I had to make a
Mhm.
pact with myself, and I never have, because it'll be easy. The dark side is like it comes with certain attractions. It comes with certain instant rewards. If I'd have said
Mhm.
to myself, you know what, I'm going to play both sides. I'm going to be a bit Darth Vaderish. I'd have robbed 10 banks by now. I'd be a gajillionaire. I'd
Yeah.
own all the banks. But I made a deal with myself never to cross over to the dark side. And to the point where it's so granular in me now that every moment I'm trying to create more good Shauns than bad Shauns because I'm trying to stay on the right side of the force, trying to make a better world, man. But not just my world that I'm in right now in this conversation with you, but all the other parallel worlds that Shaun and Jay are talking in. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, well, okay, so this is funny and it's a tangent, but I'll just say it out loud. There is a physicist named Sean Carroll,
Yeah,
and
I'm familiar with them.
you literally just explained the many worlds interpretation and what branching is. And
Yeah.
that's why a lot of physicists believe that there are parallel universes, or that the multiverse is like the totality of an infinite possibility, because every time you branch, which is you make a decision against the opposite, the opposite decision is still occurring somewhere in the
Correct.
universe. And
Correct.
then in that universe, that Sean Taylor had to decide, and he went right. So then the branching of that was another left, right? And so in this way, if it's real, and it could be, there is a Sean Taylor that goes right instead of goes left.
Correct.
And in that universe, he thought he was going to go right, and then the branching of the left goes another way, and something else occurs different than the fact that you went left in this current reality. But I've heard physicists, I've heard philosophers and psychologists talk about this, that that's literally what the executive function is doing, right? What we have is we have a multi-level branching that occurs with every decision we make. If you're conscious enough to see, or if you're able to um, give real-time input based on your experience and your life and your skills and your attributes and the characteristics of who you are, and there's a whole host of reasons, but basically there is a branching of the future that you are going to be a part of. And then at some point in these instantaneous moments, you're choosing a branch. Then the rest of the Seans that were all part of this branching decision making, they all die, and then you carry on. And then you get to the next thing in this rosary bead, and you branch out into infinity, and then you choose the one that sort of is predicted based on the path you're on, and that becomes your reality. And you do that ad nauseum for the rest of your existence in your mind. So mentally, you're always creating the multiverse. You just don't see how far it is. Like in the House of Mirrors, you
Well,
can
for
never
sure.
see the last mirror, right? You only see the ones that sort of perpetuate themselves until your vision sort of dissipates and things get too small. And then you can't see all those branching possibilities, but they're there. And you collapse infinity every time you make these thoughts. This is totally weird too, but
Not
and
really.
then
I, I'm down with it.
then you get that predictive Sean that is constantly flowing into the decisions, and it looks complete to you. It looks like this one linear path that you're on, but really it is an infinity of possibility, and you just keep collapsing right into the decision you should have made because it's the universe that you're in. All the other infinite possibilities are occurring. It's just that you happen to be observing the one that you're making the decisions in, and
That's
you're
right.
missing
And
out on all the other Sean's.
that's right. And you're that's how I've seen the world for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And
Sean
that's
Carroll does that way more justice, by the way.
yeah, you know what? I'd totally forgotten about Sean Carroll, and I'd totally
Yeah.
forgotten about. He's got a. You're right. He does have a great video on this, and I watched it some time ago.
A
But
few of them, yeah.
that's right. That's right. And but before Sean Carroll exists, before Sean Carroll was born, maybe I was starting to think about these things. Obviously, ill-educated, and obviously a rudimentary understanding of it,
Yeah.
but you know, maybe like Sean Carroll, I've thought about it a lot, but at a not at a PhD level, not at an academic level, not at an intellectual ivory tower level. I've just thought about it kicking ass.
Mhm.
And so kicking ass through our actual world and understanding that every single decision that I make is important and relevant to my world that I'm existing in right now, and my world will change 3 minutes from now if I throw my laptop through my office window, set my house on fire, and march myself straight to jail. I mean, all of these decisions are available to us in a split second,
Mhm.
and people will thoughtlessly action decisions without the understanding of not just the forward impact but the lateral impact. And I'm not talking about other people. I'm just talking about all the other Seans out there. I'd be if I decided right now that I'm a lunatic and I need to go to jail because I'm burning my house down. I just blew it for cool Sean that
Yeah.
exists in the future that I'm manifesting in the real time by making a bad decision by going Darth Vader direction. I blew it for Luke. Luke's now not in the game until
Yeah.
maybe I get out of jail, or maybe until I'm in jail and I'm converting other people into, dang, I wish I wouldn't have set my house on fire. You want to join the Luke Club? Let's freaking get after it. And so, I mean, however you spin your life, I think we are all in real time responsible to make the correct decision for who we want to be. And it just sounds so simplistic, and it is, except if you start thinking about it deeply, it's not that simple. And so I think because the concept is so deep on this parallel existence, that very few people give it the consideration that it's due, and therefore write it off as a non-factor, and therefore just get on with their casual, non-observant ways of how they operate in the real time, day after day.
Yeah. We're at 140, so I want to finish it off. And it sounds like we've been sort of talking about how we make decisions that will benefit the way that our lives move forward in the right frame. And in keeping with this multiverse, many worlds interpretation of life, maybe maybe the so if if the cosmos is infinite, it really truly does mean that there's an infinite amount of Shauns in real time doing an infinite amount of things. Now, set that aside for a moment and just go back to you currently in your own home, wearing your clothes, living your current life. Maybe when you make the proper decisions, what you're doing is you're jumping parallels. You're jumping into the next level of you that already exists in this infinite space. What you're doing is you're making the choice to go left or right. And right brings you to a certain Shaun. Maybe that's the Obi-Wan Kenobi Shaun,
The potential.
right? Or and then there's the Yoda Shaun, and then there's the Luke's. And so
And there's
far
the
you've
irritating Sean.
However, no, what I'm reality, what I'm saying is you do get to do this. You get to make choices, you get to predict the future, you get to be mindful and see where you're going to push yourself if you have the time, the patience, and the wherewithal to see the mindfulness that you do have at your fingertips, at your disposal to curate your life. And I'm using this from your collective podcast because I've been influenced by it. You can steer your life into a parallel universe where you're a better version of you, or you can stay on the same trajectory and there's infinity Shaun on either side of you, in front and behind, and you can stay in your single lane. So the choice is, if there's better versions of me in this infinite space, in the many worlds interpretation of the universe, am I choosing the right path, or am I staying on the same path, or am I choosing the incorrect one? And I think we all know that that's an opportunity that we all have.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to wear a kind of a dusty brown robe and stand up on a cliff edge and look out to the distance and pretend that they're Obi-Wan Kenobi? Who doesn't want to do that as a young
With a
boy? I mean,
lightsaber. Yeah.
word. And so, like, I mean, I want some of that action, and it's in my
Mhm.
future if I pursue it. If I
Yep.
understand that it's already there and I'm already it, but it's just how do I get there by making correct branching decisions all along the way? It's already happened. I just got to get there, and that's just time and focus and good branching decisions, staying in this universe that leads me to where I want to go in order to create the things that I believe need to be done. And so, you know, the parallel universe, the multiverse scenario is a deep, wild concept that can be simplified down to just fricking do your best every millisecond that you're drawing breath. Make the decision that leads you towards a direction that you've already identified. No one has to have this whole game figured out every day. You just need to figure out the game on a general basis of, I'd just fricking like to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, man, and kick that fricking Darth Vader ass. That should be
Yeah.
enough to get a
Yeah.
guy heading in the right direction.
Yep.
And that's enough for me, by the way.
And that's enough for this podcast episode, by the way. Choose your own adventure and choose wisely. And make sure you join us again on Upon the Horizon podcast. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and hit the little bell for the notifications. Wow. How did this one end up in an
Who knows?
interpretation of the
But I
many
dig it.
worlds? Yeah, man. Hey, that was great. We didn't even do what we said we were going to do today, but that's
That's
fine.
right.
Yeah, man.
What we did do was we had a great conversation in this
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah, because I hit record as soon as you jumped in, and then we just talked, and I love that.
Bam.
Peace.
Right, buddy.
All right. End recording.